November 1944, a rain-soaked farmhouse in Belgium. The Supreme Commander of Allied forces sits in his car, waiting, humiliated, furious. What happens in the next 20 minutes will accidentally save his life and inadvertently allow one of the bloodiest battles in American history to unfold. This is the story of pride, protocol, and the catastrophic price of ego in wartime. Rain fell in sheets across the Belgian countryside that November afternoon. In the back of a military staff car, Supreme Commander Dwight Eisenhower watched droplets race down the window as his driver navigated toward Field Marshal Montgomery's tactical headquarters. The war had reached a critical point. The Allied advance had stalled. German forces, though battered, still possessed enough strength to make every mile forward cost blood and treasure. Eisenhower carried detailed plans for the winter offensive plans that required Montgomery's immediate attention and agreement. But as the American convoy approached, Eisenhower felt that familiar tightness in his chest. That tension that only interactions with the British Field Marshal seemed to produce. Montgomery had a way of making everything into theater. His headquarters reflected this perfectly. Unlike the functional command posts favored by American generals, Montgomery's HQ resembled something between a gentleman's club and a military museum. Fine furniture requisitioned from abandoned estates, a proper tea service, and that insufferable portrait of himself displayed prominently. The staff car pulled to a stop. Eisenhower's aide jumped out first, opening an umbrella against the driving rain. But before Eisenhower could exit, a British lieutenant emerged from headquarters. Supreme Commander, Field Marshal Montgomery, presents his compliments and requests that you await him here. He is currently engaged in a critical tactical review and will join you momentarily. Eisenhower stared at the young officer, processing the words. Await him here, in the car, in the rain, like a tradesman waiting for an audience with nobility. His aide exploded. That's entirely unacceptable. The Supreme Commander of Allied forces does not wait in automobiles while subordinate officers finish their tea time. But Eisenhower raised a hand, silencing him. His expression remained neutral. How long does the Field Marshal estimate his review will require? The lieutenant replied, he did not specify, sir. Perhaps 20 minutes, perhaps longer. 20 minutes, perhaps longer. Through a farmhouse window, Eisenhower could see shadows moving, hear the faint murmur of voices. Montgomery was in there, almost certainly aware of his arrival. Making a point. Always making a point. This moment represented far more than a clash of egos. It embodied the entire tortured relationship between American military pragmatism and British imperial tradition. Between Eisenhower's coalition-building approach and Montgomery's conviction that wars were won by singular genius. Montgomery saw himself as heir to Wellington and Marlborough, a commander who understood warfare as an art form. Eisenhower was the product of a younger nation's military culture, one that valued logistics over lineage, industrial capacity over individual brilliance, and broad front pressure over elegant maneuver. Montgomery advocated for his single-thrust strategy, massive concentration of Allied forces under HIS command to drive straight to Berlin. Eisenhower favored the broad-front approach, using America's material superiority to grind down the enemy along the entire line. But in that moment, sitting in the rain, these grand strategic debates condensed into something far more primal. It became about respect. Eisenhower made his decision. Captain, inform the Field Marshal that I shall return to my headquarters. He may submit his tactical assessments in writing, which I will review at my convenience. We're leaving, the British lieutenant pleaded. Sir, I'm certain the Field Marshal intended no discourtesy, but Eisenhower's aide was firm. The Supreme Commander has given his answer. We're departing. The car doors slammed, and the convoy turned around. But what none of them knew was that at that precise moment, a Luftwaffe reconnaissance plane was circling above the clouds. The pilot, Oberleutnant Friedrich Hartman, had orders to identify senior Allied commanders. For nearly 3 hours, he had been airborne in his cramped Messerschmitt, and then he saw them. The distinctive star markings on the vehicles, the escorts, the configuration of the column. This was a very high-value target. Hartman's pulse raced. German special operations units were standing by for exactly such opportunities. He saw the convoy arrive at Montgomery's headquarters. He noted the time and location, preparing to radio the intelligence for a daring raid. But then he witnessed something curious. The convoy didn't stay. After only a few minutes, the vehicles turned around and departed. Hartman hesitated. This was irregular. High-level meetings lasted hours. Why would the Supreme Commander travel all this way, only to turn around almost immediately? Was it a feint, a deception? His training told him to report everything. But his combat instinct told him something was off. He circled once more, photographing the area. Montgomery's headquarters showed no signs of unusual activity. The more he observed, the more he became convinced it was either a deception or some kind of command dysfunction. Hartman reported the sighting but noted the anomalous behavior. German intelligence analysts, overwhelmed with contradictory information, filed his report with low priority. The planned paratrooper raid on the Allied High Command never materialized. But there was another player in this drama. Someone whose existence remained buried in classified files for more than 70 years. Her name was Claire Dubois. Officially, she did not exist. Claire was a Belgian resistance fighter recruited by British Special Operations. By 1944, she ran a network of safe houses and coordinated intelligence drops. She had been at Montgomery's headquarters that afternoon, not inside, but in the adjacent barn, waiting to deliver intelligence about German troop movements near Bastogne. Information gathered at tremendous risk. She had been waiting for hours, her urgent warnings treated as just another piece of data. But this intelligence was different. Her network had observed massive fuel stockpiling and the movement of panzer divisions thought to be in reserve. The pattern was unmistakable. The Germans were preparing something significant, and the Ardennes, that supposedly quiet forest terrain, was where it would happen. From a crack in the barn door, Claire watched Eisenhower's convoy arrive and be kept waiting. She saw Montgomery stand before his maps with a cup of tea, gesturing languidly about his own grand strategy. She saw junior officers laughing, consulting maps of northern Germany, with no indication anyone was concerned about the Ardennes. Then she saw Eisenhower leave. In that moment, Claire understood something neither general grasped. The Germans were coming. And here were the Allied commanders, so consumed by their own pride they couldn't even manage a conversation. Claire made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her short life. She left Montgomery's headquarters without delivering her full briefing. She hitchhiked rides, talked her way through checkpoints, and made her way toward SHAEF headquarters near Versailles, determined to brief anyone who would listen. She carried a leather satchel with detailed notes, hand-drawn maps, and her analysis of what the patterns indicated. She never made it. On a muddy road near Reims, 30 kilometers from Versailles, the truck carrying Claire Dubois hit a mine. The driver survived with severe injuries. Claire did not. The leather satchel containing her vital intelligence was incinerated. A few charred fragments were recovered, but without context, they meant nothing. 3 weeks later, on December 16th, 3 German armies smashed through the Ardennes, catching Allied forces completely by surprise. The Battle of the Bulge had begun. The largest and bloodiest battle American forces would fight in the European theatre, and it might have been prevented if pride hadn't stood in the way of duty. In Part 2, the secret German officer trying to stop the massacre, the true cost of the Battle of the Bulge, and the question that haunts history: could tens of thousands of lives have been saved if 2 generals had simply talked? Subscribe for Part 2, where the full scope of this tragedy unfolds.